The issue here is not Senate Republicans. The issue here is Senate Democrats, seven of whom criticized the president's executive overreach on immigration, and yet they continue to block consideration of the bill.
McConnell says it's up to you.
I love Mitch. He has a tough job to do, and so do I.
The president is determined to squeeze every possible change he can out of his remaining months. And the squeeze is on for Republicans who promised over and over again they would not allow another government shutdown. We all know what happens to promises in Washington, D.C., don't we? Our guest is the senior political analyst for the Washington Examiner, which means he has to deal with promises and politicians with fingers crossed every single day. Let's welcome Mike Barone to MidPoint. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Nice to be with you.
Mike, has John Boehner got it exactly right with the way, the criticism that he took in the last couple of months and the fact that they're backed into a corner? Is he doing exactly the right thing by getting out in front saying, it's your fault, not mine, and I'm not moving?
Well, he's certainly from a technical point of view, he's correct. The Senate Democrats are preventing this measure from coming to the floor that would fund the Department of Homeland Security with a proviso that they can't spend funds on enforcing certain of President Obama's executive orders or directives or whatever you want to call them. I think that the House Republicans made a misstep here tactically, by including not only the executive order that the president issued a couple months ago concerning illegal immigrants generally, but also going back to earlier orders that he issued back in June 2012 for the so-called dreamers, that is to say, people who were brought here illegally as children and who have met certain benchmarks of graduation, non-criminal record, and so forth. That's a highly popular measure. That tests out in the polling at 60% plus approval. President Obama's more recent measure does not test so well, and I think that by lumping those two together, presumably because some significant block of conservative Republicans wanted to do that, they made a tactical mistake. Legally it can be justified. You say, hey, the executive authority under the Constitution was exceeded in both cases. Both are instances of the president not faithfully executing the law as he's required to do by the Constitution. That's the argument. So from a legal point of view, they can say they're consistent, but from a political point of view, they gave some Democrats reasons to say, hey, I won't go along with this, or I'll let it come to a vote because I like that executive order back in 2012.
But what about from a public perception, Mike? What about from the public here? Because Mitch McConnell and everybody came out and said, no way, no how it's going to happen. The Democrats are getting the message out very well because it would seem that public opinion will blame the Republicans no matter what they say. So is this really the smart thing to do for him to come out and say, that's it, and try to at least get the message forward? Because the Democrats always seem to beat the Republicans to the point when it comes to the messaging.
Well, you're right that the Republicans are always the ones that are blamed, to the extent the public wants to blame someone for, quote, government shutdown, unquote. If you go back to the years of the Reagan administration when there was an impasse between the Democratic Congress or the Democratic House and the Republican administration, they said, well, it's the executive branch that's shutting down the government because they're not agreeing to what the legislative branch wants to do. Now you've had a situation where it's a Democratic executive branch, a Republican Congress, or a Republican House, and they're saying it's the fault of the legislative branch that the government's shut down. They should agree to do what the executive branch wants to do.
Do they need to continue,
Republicans are vulnerable to this. In part, this is a result of liberal media bias. The Constitution guarantees us a free press, not a fair one. But it's partly also a fact that the Republicans are generally seen, generally accurately, as the party that's less of a big government party, and so it becomes more plausible to say it's the Republicans shutting things down. And you have some Republican lawmakers sort of standing up on a chair saying, heck, we really want to shut down the government from time to time, and that strengthens that perception.
I only got about 20 seconds left before we take a break, but is it fair to say that they need to keep pounding the fact that 200,000 of the agencies, the Department of Homeland Security, their 200,000 employees, would keep working even if there is a shutdown?
I think that's right, and I think that the House Republicans, by taking action to overturn not just the most recent executive order, but one going back a long ways, made it harder to make that argument that we're just pinpointing this one aspect of the law.
Comes down to the numbers they have to keep getting on to. Let's head overseas next with Michael Barone, the administration's react to ISIS beheadings and more when MidPoint continues. Let's get back to work here on MidPoint with the senior political analyst for the Washington Examiner, Michael Barone, joins us. Michael, let's turn a little bit towards the Middle East. What's happening there? Fort Carson, Colorado, more than 4,000 soldiers from that area will be deployed to Kuwait to create the largest U.S. ground force currently in the Middle East. I don't know about you, but that sure seems to me and many others to be boots on the ground, and I'm wondering what the reaction is in Washington.
Well, it's not boots on the ground in a combat zone, at least not yet. I'm not aware that there's combat facility going on in Kuwait. But the fact is that, President Obama said that we were going to degrade and destroy ISIS or ISIL, this Islamic State outfit that has at least temporarily taken control of large parts of Iraq and Syria. We've flown about 2,000 sorties, Air Force sorties. That sounds like a large number, but in fact, it's a much smaller number than we flew in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s during when President Clinton was in office. And that's not degrading them very fast, unfortunately. A lot of combat soldier veterans, commanders have said that to have a really effective bombing campaign, you do need some people on the ground. You need to have people spotting. You need to have people showing where targets will be and that sort of thing. President Obama has been unwilling to order American troops in that vicinity. He continues to boast that, hey, the war in Iraq is over. We withdrew all those agreements. The administration fumbled, perhaps on purpose, the opportunity to get a status of force agreement with the Iraqi government that would have allowed the stationing of some significant number of troops there. I think that the president is probably moving towards, very slowly, towards putting boots on the ground nearer the combat zones, but they don't want to say so.
Well, that's just it. They don't want to say so, and it is fair to note that you're right. These are in Kuwait, but they're equipped with tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles. They've been training for more than a year. These are guys who actually were in the Iraq War. So it seems as if the president is indeed hedging his bets. He's putting a group close to where he feels there may be the need right away. And you used a great word in there a moment ago, the president boasting. Because it still seems to many people, no matter how you look at it, that that is what the president enjoys doing. He enjoys the boastful side of things, to be able to prove to everyone that he's not as bad as everybody else, when it certainly seems as if reality and the truth sort of gets in the way.
Well, it's sort of the equivalent of that unfortunate mission accomplished sign that was on that boat that President Bush went to San Diego to welcome back to the United States. That ship's mission was accomplished, but of course our mission as a nation in Iraq was not accomplished. And I think there's a strong argument that by the failure to get a status of force agreement, we turned something like victory into something like defeat. I think that it's useful to have American forces, whether it's naval, air, or Army, on the ground in significant parts of the Middle East. The very fact that they're there exercises something in the nature of restraint on the bad guys in that area. It gives them a sense that there may be some risk of danger if they're in Kuwait rather than in Fort Carson, Colorado. So that probably is a positive step towards the goal that the president proclaimed of degrading and destroying the Islamic State.
Do you get the feeling in Washington that from the lawmakers and people who are looking at the possibility of another war or continuing a war, that the Western allies can do the job without us, that they simply have the will and the ability?
Well, people like to say the Western allies can do with can cope without us. If you're looking at NATO allies in Europe, you're looking at a group of countries which simply have been cutting back their defense budgets and their military capabilities. You still have some significant out-of-area military capabilities in the United Kingdom and in France, and in very small countries like Estonia and larger Poland. But most of the Europeans are not pulling their weight there. We've had some military activity by Jordan, as we've seen not just in response to the burning alive of the Jordanian pilot, but before. It's now been stepped up. Some of the Gulf states have participated. But the fact is that the United States really has a military capacity that nobody else who is a friendly state can come close to duplicating. And when you're looking at serious military operations, the United States becomes involved. Libya, for example, the French took the lead in intervening, but they needed U.S. air refueling capabilities and other logistical capabilities in order to do what they wanted to do.
I always go back a little bit to hearing Colin Powell. I hear him in my ear all the time. If you break it, you fix it. And that's really what we're still into this day, is still trying to fix these things. Michael, I appreciate your time very much. Thanks for joining us. I'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, sir.
The world wasn't ready for the Ebola outbreak, and America was as clueless as everyone else when it comes to our shores. But now there could be a major breakthrough, and it couldn't come any faster for the people still dying from the disease in Africa. That's next on MidPoint.